People said they had to park like 1 or 2 blocks away. I don't know if we should intentionally start like 5 minutes late, which I know is atypical. So just given that.
She's my ride.
So, all right. So just 6:05. I know we're normally the Fox and we'll do 6:05. So, okay, perfect. So one of the things that we
But I didn't know if it was work.
But she's a great one.
Eu acho que
We got to be person. I feel like we have such great advice.
I mean, I was actually it's all the
gente ficou na dúvida se eu não ia, né? Então, esse aqui vai ser lá bem lá. Nossa, esse aqui, deixa eu falar. Deixa eu falar, esse aqui. Não, sério, esse aqui, ó. Ele faz assim, o evento dele como DJ. Ele não tá como se você estivesse no clube, tocando qualquer música. Ele tá com vines. Eu já fui por exemplo no do Chacko e ele estava tocando lá atrás no bar. Isso não tá cantando, ninguém tá dançando. Entendeu? É só pelo. Ele é o DJ que faz isso. Ele faz um vine. Esse não é super rap, eu só fiz porque ele pessoal lá daqui colocou.
Yeah, maybe I don't know all that anymore, but
eu quero saber onde que isso vai chegar. Cara, que muito diferente. A única coisa que eu chatinho com ele. Ele faz ele,
so whatever happens. Okay.
Mas ele não comprou uma hora, né? Que tanto ele faz, né? Mas ele não
Hello everyone. Thank you for coming out. I'm Liv. I am the events manager here at Lynx Books, and we're really excited to have Rebecca Bloom here to talk about when women get sick. This event is part of an ongoing collaboration between the Lynx and Curate Medical, which you see in pamphlets for on your seat. A little bit about Curate. It is a cohort of physicians who integrate primary care and menopause care for patients throughout Florida. So they focus on providing thoughtful, evidence-based care designed around the unique needs of menopause, midlife, and beyond. Their goal is to connect the dots in patients' healthcare experiences as an antidote to a system that they know can feel fragmented and chaotic. And you can learn more at journeycure.com. We're really grateful to have them as partners for this, and to bring all of these amazing writers working in the health space and thinking about the health space here to Gainesville. It's a huge honor. The next event in this health series will be April 27th. We're going to have Lasara Firefox Allen, who will talk about their book, Gender Queer Menopause, which should be super, super cool. I'm excited for that one. And it's also going to be our first virtual event in this series, so you can tune in from home. You don't have to sit in these wooden chairs. Okay, let's do introductions for both Rebecca and our moderator, Dr. Lisa Chacko. So Rebecca is a graduate of Yale College and the New York University School of Law, a former workplace and benefits attorney. She has served the Bay Area Cancer Connections for over 26 years as a patient advocate and a healthcare insurance and workplace advisor for women fighting breast and ovarian cancer. Bloom was a contributing writer to and editor of Breast Cancer in the Workplace and regularly speaks at conferences and organizations on supporting women as they navigate their health journeys. We have a very busy neighborhood, I'm sorry about that. And she lives in the San Francisco Bay Area. Have you been to Gainesville before?
Never.
Oh my goodness. A round of applause.
Thank you, I love it so far.
Good. And her moderator tonight will be Dr. Lisa Chacko, who specializes in menopause and midlife health. In her private practice, she uses tailored, evidence-based medical care to support people experiencing menopause and perimenopause. She holds an MD from the University of Pennsylvania School of Medicine and a master's in public health from the University of Florida. She is also the medical director of Curie Medical. All right, thank you both so much. This is going to be wonderful.
There's no clock here, right? So I'm going to keep an eye. So generally the way we do these, welcome Rebecca, is we have an hour together. And the first half, I get the privilege of being in conversation with our amazing guest. And then for the second half, you guys get to be in conversation with our amazing guests. So with that in mind, we're going to dive right in. We already had our intro. And we've already gotten to be in conversation because we had lunch with some amazing women today. But let me just briefly tell a bit of your story so then we can really get into the meat and potatoes. And you obviously correct me if I'm wrong. Born to be a lawyer, maybe, yes.
Kinda.
Yes. And went to all the prestigious schools and ended up in high heels and the financial district and doing corporate law. And in that space, kind of accidentally became an expert in what is really a convoluted line of work. So think large corporate mergers and acquisitions, all those employees, the health benefits have to get merged. And someone has to be smart enough to figure that all out and keep everybody on their cancer meds and going and keep it ethical and above board and know all the laws. And that was her job. So she became an expert in that space but did not love the corporate world. And there's more to the story, but family life took her out to the West Coast. Took her out to the West Coast, and through personal journey, your mother's breast cancer diagnosis, right? That was your aha moment of if we are just highly resourced, highly privileged family, and I have to take this kind of really niche legal expertise to bat just to get my mother the care she needs, what the heck is happening for everybody else? And is that really what kind of set you on the journey?
It's exactly what set me on the journey. I thought my job was going to be, thanks for the lasagna, I'll put it in the freezer and try to fit it in with the other lasagnas. No hate to lasagna, by the way, it's great. But I thought, the flowers, she's resting, thank you. I really thought that was going to be my job, and I was happy to do it. I had a tiny kid, and I had more freedom then because I was still on elongated maternity leave anyway. So that's what I thought was going to happen, and I was unprepared for what it was going to be like. The letters that came every day, the bills that came every day. One doctor saying it should be this way, another doctor suggesting, oh no, your status puts you in this camp. It's not this protocol, it's that protocol. I need a second opinion, I'd like a third opinion. Wait, but it takes 2 months to get in the door, whether or not they do take my insurance. How am I supposed to do that when I need to get my surgery scheduled now, et cetera, et cetera. It's so swirly and complex.
And even with my dad and me working double time, we had a headache and it was stressful. And we wanted to take it off her plate. But the great part was I realized I had just been gifted by staying up all night at the law firm that you mentioned, which was actually Midtown. That's the one correction, not financial. Midtown. But it's still called a Wall Street law firm. So I get you. I see how you did that.
Okay.
And anyway, I realized I learned all these ninja skills that I did think were going to be perfectly useless in the rest of my life once I figured out what that looked like. And then I thought, wow, I had just moved to Northern California, so I thought, eureka. I know something and I can do something great with it and help women.
And so my understanding is that you showed up at, it's called like Bay Area, is it Cancer Connections? Like a nonprofit, and you walked in and said, basically, I'm a hotshot whiz and I want to volunteer and help whoever I can. And then 20 years later, that's what you've been doing, essentially. And this book is about everything you learned in the trenches, kind of relentlessly advocating and applying that expertise one patient at a time to help figure out whatever the heck they needed.
Yeah, and you know, just to be clear, and you know this, the amount, I'd say this specialty in a New York law firm or any big city law firm is probably less than 1% of any firm. I mean, it's a small number of people that happen to train in this field. So when I walked in and asked if that would be helpful, it really was like they thought they got hit by a meteorite, because that's how unusual it would be for somebody with exactly that specialty to walk in and say, hey, I'd like to help.
So we're going to unpack the book a little bit today. I, again, would encourage everyone to buy a copy for themselves, for somebody else, to read the book. It's very powerful. There's tons of stories, and there's your own story, right?
Yeah.
There's your own stories, because your mother had breast cancer. That means you're at elevated risk of breast cancer. You have an incredible story in there that we might have time to get into about your journey reconciling yourself to these breast MRIs and the cost of it and the anxiety and the claustrophobia of it. You had an infertility journey too. So you were confronting this for yourself, dealing with, do the employee benefits I have access to cover IVF, all of this, and at the same time, patient after patient after patient. And I think, if I haven't said this out loud to the group, I know I've said it already to a few people, what really drew me to the energy of this work is that, to me, it fundamentally is the same energy that a physician must have, which is sort of relentless desire to solve the problem and think critically about the problem. So tell us then, what is, because I know this is like sort of a core skill and element of all of this, what is radical listening?
So radical listening looks like this. You know how there's all these memes out there, what not to say? What not to say when somebody comes to you with a diagnosis? Well, I could give you a long list of what not to say, but you guys probably already know it, and some of you have probably already heard it when you least expect it. Radical listening involves opening your mind and heart and closing your mouth and just letting the person unravel their story. You know, we talked, Megan, about how a lot of this is about storytelling. And part of my career these days is too, I'm also a storytelling coach and a book coach. So I really do come at it from that angle. So radical listening is, I want to hear, what are the concerns of the person that I'm talking to? I don't want to impose the things that I think I know upon them. I want to know which things are concerning to them, because every person you meet has a different and frankly bespoke medical journey. And that's really hard to deal with from an efficiency standpoint, because it's totally inefficient, right? I mean, it would make such great sense if we knew exactly how to plug and play these things and get them across the finish line. But that's not how it works, because we're dealing with sentient human beings who have a 360 world that includes the health space, the workplace, their own personal safety net, what their relationship is to the government safety net, what benefits they have, where they stand in their world. All those things matter. Do they or don't they have children? What's on their mind? All of that matters with a health journey. So that's what I mean by radical listening.
So you bring that kind of radical listening to bear when you're going to sit down with someone for whom you're going to advocate. First, the unraveling. First, the goals. First, the obstacles, figuring that out. But there's another side to radical listening, which is it happening in the healthcare space? Our doctors offer radical listening. Is the healthcare team offer radical listening? And obviously, this is part of the problem as well. It leads to delayed diagnosis, confusing plans, etc. Right? So there's two sides to the story there, no?
I agree, but I also would say 9 times out of 10, it's what the system superimposes on doctors and medical staff
Amen.
that gets in the way of that more than the disposition of the human actors involved.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree with that. You use the word inefficient, so I can't help but read this quote. If every type of person interfaces with the medical system, they must walk through an idiosyncratic labyrinth to get the care they need and access the benefits they have earned, what have we got? The most inefficient system imaginable. That's what. Based on the experience of the many women I have worked with, I can attest not only to this inefficiency, but also to the maddening level of stress and nearly intolerable level of chaos that it causes people who are already in crisis. So, maybe we should get into some of those stories. I do want to highlight a big conundrum in our healthcare system, which is that it is a highly regulated space. So the bureaucracy goes with regulation, which is good. It is important. So, either weigh in on that, or maybe we should just get into some stories to bring this to life. I don't know if there's a particular story that you want to share first, that you feel like most illustrates this. I think you had mentioned one earlier. You can pick the first one you share.
So the liquid morphine story really gets me. And part of that is I really did act like a jerk. But and so I need to be human about what I did because I got so angry. So what happened is a dear friend of mine, her ex-spouse was very ill and in hospice. And I don't understand why the hospice nurse ran out of liquid morphine at just the wrong time. And I have to say I was snarky. I was bad from the beginning. She called me and said, "What should we do?" She ran out of liquid morphine. And I said, "Isn't that her job?" I mean, I was rude from the get-go because I just thought, how did that happen? That just seems like something that should not happen. So anyhow, what happened is I jumped in my car and I said, "I'm already on the way to the pharmacy, so please call the doctor and get them to call it in, and I will get it as fast as I can, and I will zoom it over to you because I can't think of a faster way to get this done. So you don't have to leave his side, your daughters don't have to leave his side." So, sounds great. I thought that would work. Then I get there, I'm tapping my foot, all the nice people in line see that I'm edgy, and they let me cut the line, which is so kind. Again, humans are basically kind most of the time. They were. And then I get there, and there's that moment have you ever had this happen at the pharmacy? The person just does this thing, and you're thinking to yourself, why is this taking so long? Like, I mean, I could search on Google faster than that. I mean, definitely. Why is this taking so long? The system seems so, to your point, there are regulations that I don't know about. And this is a controlled substance. So there's probably things that have to happen because of that. But all I know is I'm waiting and thinking, okay, seconds really count. So after what was more than seconds, it was minutes, maybe even 5. The person says, "We don't have the liquid morphine." And I said, "Well, what do you mean? The doctor said liquid morphine." "Well, nobody asked us if we have it. They just sent us the order for it." I said, "Well, who has it? Let me look."
Yeah.
So it turns out a place a couple of exits away on the freeway has it. I said, "Great, can you transfer the prescription?" "Oh, no, we can't do that." So I say, "Okay, I gotta go." So I run in my car, and again, I call my friend from the car, and I go, "Okay, you need to call the doctor back, or have your daughter who's got the MBA, who doesn't take no for an answer, do it, and get it." And she said, "Okay, I'll do it." And I said, "Tell them to pour it and have it ready so that I can literally run in, whisk it away, and then get back on the road." So I get there, and it's the same thing. There's a line. The line of people, and I mean, how is this still this inefficient after all this time, right? Like I talked about inefficiency, this is a good example of it. Again, the people are kind to me. I'm sweating. I mean, I'm stressed out about this because I don't want there to be a painful death when there could be a pain-free death. I mean, and that's what's at stake. So I get up to the front, and again, this is where I really did act like a jerk, and I exposed myself to be one. I look at this, seems like a 20-year-old kid behind the desk, and I say, I'm here to get the medicine, and you were supposed to pour it, the doctor called, and she says, oh no, you can't do that. I have to check the insurance now. I said, you didn't check the insurance? I couldn't check it till you got here. Really? No, I'm not allowed. It's like, I never heard of that rule, but apparently that's a rule at CVS or Walgreens, whichever one. I don't know which one. So I look at her and I go, listen, this is a serious situation. This person is on death's door. I really need to get this medicine. She says, well, go shopping. See if you can get some shampoo or something. Keep busy. I'll do my best. Well, I get the text, and it's too late. And then that's really when I acted like a jerk, because I go right up to the counter and I say, you know what, forget it. He's effing dead. And I did say that. The daughters still joke with me. Every time they see me, they say, he's effing dead, because it's become my tagline. And this poor pharmacist goes, well, what am I supposed to do with the medicine now? And I was like, not my problem. Talk to the hand, and out I went. And I was a jerk that day because I was contents under pressure. But this shouldn't be like this. I mean, it wasn't her fault. She was an actor following the rules, as was the first person at the first pharmacy.
Whose job is it to connect those little dots in healthcare, the details that matter the most? And your work is so in the trenches. This is what came up over lunch, is this in the trenches work, right? We're all called in different directions. Some people are in DC writing health policy. Some people are in Haiti building hospitals. Some people are, doing cancer surgeries. Everyone's called in their own way to contribute to this. You clearly have been called to be in the trenches. And so what stands out to me about that very tragic story, though, is just kind of like the raw nature of it being you in the car, like just getting places and demanding things and being this third person.
Yes.
Right? Being this third actor. In theory, although there's many more, and I never want to reduce it to this, but there's the doctor and there's the patient. But they're really a core theme of your book is that there needs to be a third person. There needs to be this advocate. We need to train armies of advocates. We need them built into our healthcare system, but also we can do it for each other. So talk to us about this idea of a healthcare advocate. I know that we have people in the room who are very called to that role. And just speak on why it's necessary, speak on how we can do it for each other and how we can ask for others, just speak on that idea of this third person.
Okay, so first of all, I love that you call it the third person, because we need third people and we need third spaces, like this space. Places where we can come together. So, why does every woman need an advocate? It's because no woman should ever go this alone. And from my perspective, although I do see it every day and I help women every day who tell me how alone they feel, I don't think it's necessary. Women are the ones holding up the walls of the buildings. We're holding up the sky. We take care of one another. We are conditioned to take care of others, but we are not conditioned to ask for the help when we need it. We put the money in the bank when it comes to kind of, the social bank, right? We all give to our neighbors, to our friends, to our family members, but it's so hard for us to say, okay, I'm the one who needs right now. It's really hard. But here's the thing. I know how to do it after all these years of doing it, and that's what's in this book. And the first thing is, every woman, even before you have a diagnosis, take stock of your own safety net and pre-draft your team. Act like you're a coach. This is a sport, okay? Life is a team sport, as it turns out. Figure out who are those people in your life and what are they good at. If you ask the right person to do something that they're great at, they're going to love doing it for you. Their life is going to be better for having the opportunity to do that for you. And it's a lot about picking the right chief of staff. That's the way I talked about it. And I realize that's corporate, but I do have that corporate background. And one of the things I see is people do not hesitate to project manage everything in the corporate world, in the nonprofit world. So what I'm saying here is project manage, project healing. That's all you gotta do. And it's doable. So you get that chief of staff and you let that person run. Give that person the clipboard and the whistle. One question people ask me all the time is, should that be my partner if I'm partnered? Often I'm going to say no, unless you've got that type A partner who needs to get lost in the details and not deal with their feelings. And there are such people. And that's how they cope. And if that's their coping mechanism, let them cope in that way, because they might feel that that's the best way to take care of you if you're the patient. But once you start down that path, it becomes a movement. And movements turn into ripples, and they turn bigger, and they change cultures. So the bottom line is, no woman should ever go this alone.
And can we normalize asking people to attend doctor's appointments with us?
Absolutely.
And how do you suggest someone do that? You have a big specialist appointment coming up, and you know there's all these kind of things that are going to be talked about, plus you've got your feelings and all this going on. So people who have very individualistic society, people aren't comfortable with
I
that.
agree.
So, I mean, do you have an advice on how they ask for that kind of support?
I do, and part of it has to do with us having this conversation, because I just did a webinar with doctors and other medical professionals explaining the role of an advocate and kind of normalizing it for them and saying, look, this is how you can work with that person. Maybe you don't want to check the clinical trials, but they'll check them for you. Right. You know, you can offload some of the jobs that you don't have time to do. Maybe you need a HIPAA form, maybe you don't. It depends on the medical system and how they think about those things. But let's get comfortable with the idea that another set of eyes and ears is going to make a huge difference. We all know when you go into your own doctor's appointment, even when you have your list of questions, which I highly recommend compiling thoughtfully, but even when you do, you get a little glazed when you hear the answers. You just do. And yeah, there are notes in the electronic health record, and yeah, you can look back on those notes, but we all understand that they might not cover every single thing that gets said.
Or they're wildly inaccurate and
Yes.
they're documenting physical exam that they never did, for example.
Right. Or they're asking questions that are really about upbilling as opposed to what you're actually dealing with. I mean, there's a lot of things that they can be, but that's a really great reason to have somebody else in the room. And some of that is also tone, right? You walk out and you go, that doctor wasn't helpful. I didn't feel it. And then you say to your friend, did you think that? No, I didn't think that at all. That's how that person talks. But when you're in an extreme and stressed out situation, you're going to hear those tones. You're going to forget details. That's what happens. Your brain is going to conflate things that you thought you might have heard, but maybe you didn't hear. And it's not because you're not smart, and it's not because you're not paying attention. It's because of the situation you're in. So normalizing that idea that, anybody a fan of the movie Grease? Everybody needs a second at Thunder Road, you guys. That's just what it is, And I really believe that, and it makes a difference.
So before we maybe go to other stories or new topics, I just want to pause here for another minute on this idea of you need an advocate, you need to build this team. I know this still feels weird and uncomfortable to some people. They're like, what team? Like, what are you talking about? So let's give a couple more concrete examples. One is, will you attend this appointment with me? While you're there, will you write stuff down? Another is maybe to a healthcare or medical person in your life, hey, you have these tools where you can look things up that I don't have access to. Could you look up this clinical question for me or ask a friend? Give like one or two or even three more like concrete asks that people could make of other people, specific, thoughtful asks that would be meaningful to their own healthcare.
So one is, if you do have a doctor friend or a nurse friend or another medical professional, you get those results of your scans after hours, almost always. And there are people who seem to have the self-control to not open them. I don't know. I don't understand that. I could never. That's like when back in the day when somebody else knew the gender of your baby and you didn't. I was like, what do you mean? I could not tolerate that. Some people have that self-control where they don't want to look until the doctor looks. But most people that I know look. And then they often freak out, often unnecessarily. Imagine if I could ask you if you could just look at that with me and tell me if I should freak out about that one word.
And some people are hesitant to call in favors in their medical friends, but I think it's reasonable to do. Give us another couple
It can be a
examples
neighbor.
of
Yeah.
asks of things that people could do. Is it food? Is it transportation? Is it
Yeah.
what are the things that people should be asking?
So yes, those are big ones. Laundry, carpools, of course. But my favorite one, because it's the job I love most, give me every single bill. I'm going to get you a notebook. This is the gift for somebody who's on a health journey. Don't buy them a scented candle. This is the gift. Go to the drugstore, get a nice notebook and a 3-hole puncher if you don't already have one. Take every piece of paper and take it home. And you organize it. You look at it. You make sure that nothing is awry, and if something is awry, you say, pick me, I'm the girl who's going to do your appeals, you go heal, I'll take care of this.
I love those examples, and I do want to acknowledge something here when I said this is sort of trenches work. Like, we're actually talking about things you can do in the context of a system that's not ideal, right? And this conversation can feel frustrating for people, where it's like, well, why should we be doing all this? Shouldn't the system work for us? And health policy and reform is a whole other conversation, and a very, very important one. But the fact is, if you get a diagnosis today, tomorrow, or yesterday, you're going to have to deal with this stuff immediately. So those are very, very good pieces of advice. I want to touch on 2 important topics: employment and divorce.
Yeah, those are 2
Okay,
important
because
topics.
a lot of healthcare is tied into those 2 types of contracts.
That's very true.
And you have some stories in, I'd like you to share maybe a story, maybe in each category, and even just the salient points. What do you see? What happens to women when they lose benefits through a divorce? Or what happens to women when they get sick and they're in a big job with a company that provides benefits and then they lose benefits? Talk a little bit about this space. How can people think about this? This is very overwhelming. It keeps people trapped in jobs. It keeps people trapped in marriages, these benefits. On the other hand, you can feel very insecure once you lose those benefits. So just speak some wisdom on this space.
Okay, so let's do divorce first. I did a really great divorce podcast, and we got so deep into the divorce stuff that it was really cool, because I don't get to go that deep usually. And it's called Beyond Divorce, which is really cool if anybody wants. It's on my website, and you can listen to it. So in the divorce situation, even under great circumstances, again, you see, we always read about the bad divorces. We always hear about, one person trying to screw the other person in all those ways. But even in a good one, this story happened, and it broke my heart. So it was a same-sex marriage, and these 2 women were so lovely and so good to each other. They just outgrew each other. And they had kids, and one of them had a big tech job. And I don't think they really thought it through. They probably just would have stayed married and kept both of them on the benefits. But they were just trying to do everything right and split things out and just be kind to one another. And so the one without the corporate job said, okay, I'll get my own insurance. It's not a big deal. It was after the ACA had been passed, and she thought, I can do this. So she gets herself a new policy, and then 3 months later, she's diagnosed with breast cancer. And what she finds out is that her new insurance is no longer taken by her sort of home medical system. It was when she bought it, but it was towards the end of the plan year, and they kick somebody out every year. This happens all the time. A lot of the systems look at who's doing the worst job of reimbursing us the way we want to be reimbursed. Well, let's have a fight with them. And it's happening right now in New York City, Mount Sinai and Anthem. They could not make a deal.
We know it well. It's called University of Florida Health System of United.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same thing. And who's the one who eats it? It's the patient.
It's the patient.
Right. Yeah. Because if you're not right in the middle of something, then you can't argue continuity of care. And then what do you have to do? You have to find new doctors. So this woman finds herself with a breast cancer diagnosis. She can't go to the place where her former spouse and children, and it's closest to her house. She can't go there anymore. And she just has to change and find something else. And she's just more stressed out than she has to be because of this. And it was a much tougher journey because of that. It worked out okay, and she's doing great, but it was a much tougher journey. And she felt locked out of her own life because of it. So that's that story. Workplace. The workplace is so complex. Those laws could really give a person a headache. I mean, they gave me headaches sometimes. That was before menopause. Headaches, gone. But anyway, this particular story was really interesting too. So it was a woman who had a very specialized set of skills. And she had taken a leave of absence, and her employer seemed decent. And, in general, I recommend that people really befriend HR. Don't start out going, I just know that you're looking to fire me and I don't trust you. Because most times HR is really there to keep people healthy and happy and working. That's their job, right? So, and they were my clients when I was a lawyer. So they're usually the best people in the big companies, honestly. Anyway, so this woman has, this very specialized kind of coding skill. And all's well, but then she extends her leave, and then she calls and says, okay, I'm getting ready to come back. And they said, oh, well, we just interviewed somebody to take that slot for you. We're going to be able to try to find some other job for you, and the company will do that. And she called me in a panic and said, if I don't continue working in my specific field, my career is going to stall. I'm not going to be able to get the next job if I want the next job. I'm going to lose my authority, my seniority, even if they pay me the same, even if I get the same benefits, I'm no longer the person that I was, and I no longer have the status that I worked my butt off to have. So she said, what should I do? And I said, you should let them know that you really want your job back, and that that's the job for you, and that you would like them to consider placing the other candidate elsewhere because you really need it, you're coming back, and you want it. And I think they got nervous that she talked to somebody. You hardly ever have a lawsuit. I actually had one the other day. A woman actually called me and told me, I think I'm being discriminated against, and a couple of lawyers in the Bay Area were like, yeah, we agree, that's a 7-figure case, we'll take it. That doesn't usually happen though. Usually it's much more subtle than that, but you want them to know, if you're feeling wronged, you want to telegraph to them without saying, oh, I spoke to a lawyer. But you want them to hear in your voice that you know the deal.
You're posturing that you have that legal
exactly.
recourse. Yeah.
So that's what she did. She basically was like, no, this is what I want, and this is what I'm naming, and I am prepared to come back on the 10th. And so she did that, and she faced him down. I think they were worried that she was going to extend again, and they were playing chicken with her. So she played back, and she won, and she got her job back, and then a year later she left. Because she was pissed at them. But she left with her status as a specialist in this very esoteric thing intact.
And so much of this is you getting in these women's ears and saying, listen, there's options, let's do this, let's try this. And I can't help but think the ways that we can do that for each other and be in each other's ears. I think people sometimes don't want to intrude. They don't want to get into your private business. I mean, I had a cancer diagnosis, and I straight up had a colleague who never acknowledged it to me. And I knew she did. And I finally, when I had the bandwidth, almost a year later, said, that was very bizarre to me. Yeah. And her answer was, well, I thought he'd want to intrude.
Yeah.
And so how do we show up for people and sort of lovingly intrude?
Well, I'm glad you said that, because you guys know what cancer ghosting is, right? And it's real. And I have talked with so many women who feel like people just dropped off and fell off their life grid. Like they're gone. Why? And I think it's because they don't want to intrude. It's usually not because they're mean. Sometimes it's because they're afraid. I mean, fear is a big deal, right? But their fear should be bigger than what you're going through, right?
But their discomfort.
Yeah,
right?
it shouldn't
compare to yours.
It just shouldn't be that they're feeling off, so like that should govern. It shouldn't. But how do you get past that
I do think we need social norms. I think we need to say out loud, if somebody that you know has a cancer diagnosis, we should teach our children this as well. The right thing to do is to say, hey, I heard this is going on. I'm so sorry to hear that. Say it.
I
Do
agree.
not make it their job. This is the first step because now the door is open.
I agree.
Now you're in the story with them. Now perhaps they might ask you for help or you could offer help.
I'm shocked that one of your colleagues didn't know to do that, honestly.
Younger colleague,
Yeah.
but now she knows.
Yeah, but it's not just that, it's also, if you want to be helpful, be really specific about how you want to be helpful. That's one of the things that women have told me over and over again. When people say, I'm here for you, whatever you need, that sounds nice in the moment, but to your point, it puts the emotional labor back on the person who's on the journey. It's better to say, I can do your bills for you, I can do your laundry for you, I'm an amazing cook. My lasagna, I hated on lasagna before, but mine is so good, I can do that for you. Be specific, and then that person has a list of things they can choose from instead of this amorphous idea that you're there.
I am a health policy nerd, but I'm not going to let this conversation go there. I will say, though, that this book gets into the history of how our insurance system evolved, how it ended up even being an employer benefit, which I would argue is not intuitive and incorrect. How Medicaid and Medicare came about, and of course the Affordable Care Act. I think it's worth pausing just to acknowledge that an extraordinary number of Americans, and this is not a political statement, have lost coverage in the last few months.
Yes.
So uninsurance is on the rise. And before we open it up, I mean, there's so many topics here that I didn't even get to, but I do want to just ask you, like in this moment right now, and looking back over the past 25 years, how has this space evolved, either in how the patients themselves are evolving or the system, for the better or for the worse, and how do you stay hopeful?
Yeah, so let's do the bad news first. So the bad news is there are too many stakeholders trying to draft off the system. It's already running on dollars as it is, and then we've got this device and that tech app that every system has to have, et cetera, and ultimately it's the patients who know. So that's the hard part. It's like the operative metaphor is turning out to be greed and efficiency instead of healing and wellness. So that's problematic and tough. That said, I have a ton of hope when it comes to women's health because we are having these conversations. First of all, less up to the Menoverse, really, because these women know how to get attention, they know how to get the media involved, they know how to have amazing conversations, they know how to get laws changed. And yes, it's a nose cone. There's a lot of other stuff that matters so much. I mean, we've got younger women getting diagnosed at higher rates with breast cancer, with colorectal cancer. We've got research that still needs to be done. The research gap still needs a lot of work, but at least we're talking about the fact that women weren't in clinical trials prior to 1993. I think we need to unpack that a little bit. We need to talk about how it didn't get better the next day. We need to talk about how studies are longitudinal. And we also need to talk about the fact that that doesn't mean that everything that should be studied is being funded. Because it still isn't, but we need to keep talking about those things in the way that we already are. But I've never seen a bigger groundswell around talking about these issues. We've got investors interested in ways that matter and are relevant and important. We've got people talking about it in the health space. We've got practitioners not only living it, but educating younger people in it. And that's how change happens. So I'm excited about that. I truly am.
You strike a wonderful balance about having your eyes open enough to the dark side that you can get in the trenches and solve problems and stay optimistic. I think we could all learn from that. I want to open it up. We did start a couple minutes late, and so we can run a couple minutes over. And you guys, this is sort of an oracle of health advocacy, so pick her brain. I know that you'll want to sort of tell a little bit of your story to frame your question, but really I would love to hear questions. Ask for advice, ask for perspective, predictions, ask for whatever you want. But let's ask questions of our guest who has spent 25 years in the trenches helping one woman at a time certainly could have been doing other things, really high dollar things, but was called to do this work, which is a powerful, powerful thing. So I'd love to open it up to questions. And I think we see two already, and we'll jump in. And I know I want to hear from you because you told me that you want to be doing exactly what she's doing. So you're not getting out of here without asking that question.
Hi, hello. So my question revolves around the advocacy piece, but also the interface with the doctors in the room, so to speak, and the healthcare team. So my daughter last year received a cancer diagnosis right before her 21st birthday. We started out in adult oncology and found out that the dinosaur who was her primary oncologist was also my mother's oncologist 20 years ago, or 15 years ago. So long story short, we had a wonderful experience with this man, even though my first experience or reaction was, oh God, like, what's this gonna be like? And what we found throughout the course of her treatment, after sort of going to pediatric from adult and seeing that we are informed from like a Chinese medicine, more holistic viewpoint, not just treating the symptom, and so we had a lot of this knowledge that we were bringing in. One of the people on her care team is a very high level, highly regarded acupuncture physician in the country, and has had amazing results with cancer care treatment and success in that realm. So what we found when we were in the room advocating or saying specifically no to certain treatments or asking for a different method of receiving, for example, the antifungal medication that chemo patients need to have, especially in Florida, asking for it to be aspirated instead of intravenously, and getting so much pushback. And what we found with the care team, most of the more seasoned, experienced people who would potentially have the most spread of knowledge were the most resistant to making allowances or even listening to us, versus a lot of the residents and a lot of the younger people would be like, maybe not afterwards, would be like, I want to know more, because we're bringing in all of this outside information. She had a radical early response, and I attribute it 100% to the holistic care that we received between craniosacral therapy, Chinese medical herbs, the whole thing. That chemo was part of it, right? And so this curiosity that existed in the new realm that was so pushed back with the more established physicians, how do you address that? How do you, without alienating or making them your enemy, because you do need them on your team, right? You're in that hospital every day. How would you consider navigating that particular piece of it?
So this is a really loaded and interesting question. First of all, I have had this experience so many times now that I had to write about it and really think about it after my book came out, because it keeps coming up. The system is failing women, and we all know that's true. And we can't be surprised about it when women look outside traditional medicine to try to create a more holistic way of healing. You can't be surprised by that. So as an advocate, and then I'll talk about how to talk with the doctors about it, but as an advocate, I have issues around where do I stand on all of this. I've had to think about it. I've had to make up kind of a framework in my head to say, okay, I can acknowledge, I just said 2 minutes ago, we know that things work that haven't been studied, right? And we know the system of how things do and don't get studied, and who funds them, and what does that look like, and it's so layered and complicated. So of course there are going to be things that can be helpful that haven't been fully proven in the ways that we're accustomed to things being proven. So where do I stand on that? Do I think something has to be peer-reviewed and FDA approved in order for me to go, yeah, let's think about how this all fits in? The answer is no, I don't. But I do have some lines that I do draw. Like, is a person being manipulated? Are they spending a crazy amount of money on something? Is there any hint of anything like that? Anything of about a vulnerable person being taken advantage of, that really does bother me. So I always have to say it. And then the other thing is it getting in the way of doing the things that we know work? Those are the things that are stopping points for me.
I want to just add, all of the things and the interventions that we did because of this acupuncturist were peer reviewed. He did studies with Johns Hopkins and with Harvard on these treatments. It's all peer reviewed, like medically accepted treatment.
Yeah, I mean, that stuff is thousands of years old, right. So that doesn't surprise me at all. Okay, so now let's go to the second piece, and I appreciate you saying that because there's a wide range,
like
right?
the snake oil.
Yeah, there's a wide range, and you know, things like acupuncture, things like meditation, they've all, you know, guided imagery, they've all been studied and proven, right? So how do you talk to a person who's been trained in Western medicine about this? Well, you know, first of all, I think Lisa can help in this conversation, and I'm sure you run into it all the time. But in general, like I have a whole chapter about how to talk with doctors in general. And at the end of the day, it's a partnership. And I feel like if a doctor isn't giving you the vibe that they want to be your partner, it may be time to look for a new doctor if you can find one and if that's possible. And if you have access to it, we talked about access, it may not be so easy, but if you have access. And then the other thing is, how do you communicate with the doctor, right? If you do it respectfully and thoughtfully, and you show them, hey, look, these are these things that we've researched, and here's the information about it. We don't want to bombard you with it, but we want to let you know that we have been looking into this, and here's what we found. This is the way to have this conversation.
You fundamentally don't need their permission. I mean, I also believe in that. I mean, I think in an ideal world, everyone on your team has blessed everything else about your plan, and I look for that for my patients. I say, hey, this is my plan for you. I suspect that Dr. A and your team is going to be a little confused about what we're doing. Let's get their blessing. This is not the same as permission. So there can be a world where you're like, Dr. A is here for Dr. A services, and I'm over here with Dr. B doing stuff.
That's exactly.
And I mean, I think that can be safely done, but it's not ideal. So sometimes you do play the game, right?
How does that play into liability for the core team also?
It depends, right? And that's one of the reasons why they may not say what you want to hear.
Right, they're not going to.
But that doesn't mean that they're not going like this either. Right. Because they have their own rules that they have to follow. There's a lot of stuff behind the curtain that doctors have to deal with that the patients don't see. And liability is one of those things. Yeah. But that can just be, you know, magic words said or not said.
But understanding that is also important because everyone's responding to incentives. So sometimes they're hedging just because it's frankly their job to hedge. So let's not wait around for them to put their money down because that's ultimately not the way we have to decide. But that's a really important scenario. I want you guys to read in the book her personal story about the MRI to know how real this is, and we can open for more questions because I want that to be the case. But when she declines an MRI and the doctors kind of shamed her and the whole journey and all, first of all, I just also need to say this. You're a good writer. Not everybody who writes like an informational book is actually like good at prose, but you're extremely intelligent and therefore a very good writer. So the anecdotes are, you feel them. And the anecdote when you went to get the MRI that you did not want to get and that cost $18,000 or something absurd, which by the way, we can cash price it for $400 in the state of Florida. But anyways,
I can't believe it.
And I know that because Kruti found that answer for me last week because she's a relentless healthcare advocate. But when they're saying that with the little details, you went in for the MRI and they're like, it's so great to see you, you look like you're doing great. And you're like, I've never met you before. Or they're wishing luck to you on your cancer journey. And you're like, I don't have cancer. All these little things that make healthcare so bad. But read that story because it speaks directly to that, which is declining a recommended service and the way people will shame you for that. And then the healthcare relationship kind of splinters. And so I'm going to very lovingly say this. Give your context and then ask your question, because I honestly would love a 12-hour story marathon, but we're gonna try to follow you the next one. Yeah, you can.
So on that note, I am a veteran and I get my medical care at the VA, and every time I walk in there, they say, "Can I help you find your veteran?" So yeah. I definitely relate, but my question is more to the medical advocacy. Is this something you see as more of a a profession, because as somebody who worked in project management and systems efficiency, my last step is to add more people. My last step is always to add more people. So if it is something you see as a medical profession, is there somebody within the healthcare system already that can hold that role?
Yes. So the heroes of healthcare today are the social workers and the nurse practitioners and the nurses. Absolutely, 100%. Because they end up doing this for people, and it's not usually their stated job. Sometimes social workers, it's part of their list of responsibilities, and they do an amazing job. But the problem is, it's not really well funded. And I get your point, like, do we want to add more expense? Well, maybe there are other ways to think about that, right? One way I've seen is there's an employee benefit out there that is adopted by quite a few large companies. I did an event with TIAA. They give this to their employees. They have a patient advocate company that they pay, and their employees can turn to these folks and get an advocate when they need one. So, again, I know we don't like imposing more costs on business necessarily.
It's an employer benefit for now, so that makes perfect sense.
Right.
What you're saying, yeah.
Right.
But the idea is that it could be a service within healthcare.
It could be a service. It should be a service. There was a hot minute when the ACA had a ton of funding for this very thing. That's been cut by 90%.
So is this a service that you have when you get a diagnosis, or is this a service that you have all the time and it's somebody who helps you advocate with your primary care to your oncologist if you need one, to your gynecologist if you need one?
It can be either. Most people don't avail themselves of it until they feel they really need it. I mean, there are some people who even just making routine appointments is enough of a rigmarole that they wish they had someone to help them. And that's legit. I get it. But most of the time, people aren't asking for it until they find themselves on a journey and they find themselves dealing with the many crossroads that a health journey entails.
Especially with a big diagnosis is when it shows up the most. But yeah, it could be everything from a service to just a radical way to show up for each other. And I think it has to be both. And even in an ideal system, as humans, we need the skills to show up for each other, right? And do this kind of relentless, loving intrusion that is your life calling. I do want you to ask a question just because we spoke the other day and you said that you're really trying to get into essentially this line of work, right? Of healthcare advocacy. So ask a question for the pro.
So I do it on a small scale because I had multiple myeloma. And when I was diagnosed, it was a shock. And I had a great, a cancer navigator. I had a good resource team that told me the very things that you're talking about. You have to have support, and support does not always look like I can come and take you to the doctor, what they're available to do. So what I've done now is created spaces where I meet people that have cancer, and I say, this is what you do, this is how you get out there. And I see the gaps with a lot of people don't know how to advocate for themselves.
Yep.
Every time I go to the doctor, I advocate. I had a doctor tell me that I was going to die. I'm still here. I advocated. I fought. So I have the same passion. I started a teaching manual on how to share with people how to advocate for yourself, but I haven't done anything with it as of yet. But I want to get into certain doors or certain places because people need to know this information.
Absolutely.
It's there, and I'm trying to figure out the best way to share and impart.
So that's exactly why I wrote this book.
Okay.
I mean, you are speaking my language. And because I had this background in storytelling and I knew how to get books done, I just wouldn't quit until I got an agent and I got a publisher. Because there are people like you and me, and they end up self-financing, self-publishing, and then it doesn't get out there that way. So, first of all, see me after class for a few reasons. Because I want to give you my card and I want to talk to you about the disease that you had and because I know a lot of people that you could help.
Yeah.
But also, make videos, go talk to this wonderful health center right here, say, could we have a support group? Could you help me start support groups, et cetera, et cetera? If you want to get paid for it, I bet we could figure that out too.
One of the things that I did realize is I had two doctors. When I'm from Georgia, so I went to Emory, and I had a doctor here in Florida I'm not going to say the hospital. And when I went to my primary doctor, he said to me, I'm going to tell you what your problem is. You know too much.
Yeah.
You're too educated.
Yeah.
And because you're too educated, you're intimidating your doctor because you know more than he does because you went to a teaching hospital. I went to a university. I went to Emory University. Had a very strong support system. I educated myself. At first, I didn't even realize I knew anything. It was when cancer hit me the second time.
Yeah.
So I created a plan, and that's when we shut down here in Gainesville. I had to travel to Jacksonville just to get treatments because Shands wasn't doing anything for people with blood cancers.
Yeah.
So I called Moffitt, got upset, and I said, I'm not seeing him anymore because everything that he's telling me, he was reading my chart, and my chart was saying 36, but I peaked.
Yeah.
But he never said anything. So that's why I'm really strong, and we have to speak.
Yes.
We have to speak up. I tell my daughter, you have little girls, you have to speak.
That's
and
right.
we're afraid because we've been taught to be quiet. And
We sure have.
can't be quiet.
It's like I said before, we're
not cats. We
conditioned
don't
to
have
ask for
none
help.
lives.
Yeah. I love that. And I know some of your story, and I know some of you, what happened with thinking about doctors picking meds on which med would be the most profitable to that clinic's bottom line and calling them on that. And that is powerful self-advocacy that most people don't have the courage to do. We have a ton of questions here. All right, we're going to go into speed round.
I have a very quick question. Actually, you're talking about knowing something, going to your primary. I just had an experience at Emory, actually, of all places. My son moved to the Atlanta area. He has cystic fibrosis. He suddenly had a GI bleed and started vomiting blood all over the ER there. I flew up. This was on Thanksgiving. You couldn't even get a flight. And I somehow got one. And I got up there, and I couldn't find him. Nobody was helping me find him. I thought he was in the morgue. I was terrified. Turns out they were transporting him to the floor where he was unresponsive and everything. I couldn't get a straight answer from anybody, and I didn't know anybody there. I didn't know his doctors. They didn't know he was there. He was in an outlying hospital. What do you do in a situation where, I'm pretty solid and I'm pretty outspoken, and my family's medical field, so I kind of know the other side too. But I couldn't get an answer from anybody of whose doctor was even there.
Was this a HIPAA situation?
No, it was not. I'm on his HIPAA.
So they didn't say, oh, we can't tell you because he's an adult. Nothing
But
like
I couldn't
that.
figure out what was going on.
Because
I
I've
didn't
seen
know-
that
I
too.
didn't know what treatments were happening. My husband showed up. He was in a different state at the time. He got there. He's a doctor.
Yep.
And all of a sudden they're talking to him.
Right. Well, this is, we didn't even get
They didn't
into
even know he was a
why.
doctor yet.
Yeah.
They just knew he was a man.
Yeah.
So they're talking to him.
Incredible. We didn't even get into why the system is different for women, and there's so many things baked in because we just don't have time tonight. But you all know anyway. Yeah. Okay. So what would I do again in that situation, short of waiting for the alpha to walk in like that? Is I would ask for the social worker in the right department and say,
it was a holiday. It was Thanksgiving.
well, that's
Nobody was there.
a horrible imperfect storm. Yeah.
Is there some way to have? This is wonderful to have this.
Yeah.
I saw this morning. I saw it in my email. I'm going. Come. But is there something that can be said? I don't have any idea how to do it, but for people who have a crisis situation, I didn't know
Yeah.
it was going to find
that you
there.
mentioned.
Yeah,
that
like
maybe they could
the Patient Advocate Foundation, there's a lot of there's Triage Cancer is a wonderful organization. There's a few that are really wonderful, but it's still, there isn't like a hotline, like for Thanksgiving, we should make one.
The nurse man, ask for the nurse manager.
Yes, I was gonna say, if you can't find a social worker, figure out who the head nurse is. Absolutely.
Yeah, top nurse, top social worker.
She's
These
the
are the people,
boss.
yeah, that are the most likely
The
to
doctors
get
are
them.
scared of her, usually.
the manager. That's a good question. Yes, and then behind you.
Okay.
I just want to ask a quick question. One comment, sorry, I have to make just one quick comment as a medical anthropologist in the room. This concept of therapy management group is very common cross-culturally, and particularly in African cultures and contexts, and I do research in Tanzania. But just this idea that other people are involved in your healthcare decisions and actually make decisions on your behalf is, so thinking about that kind of cross-culturally is interesting. What you're saying exists and has for a very long time.
Sure.
But my question is, and I'm currently in my class, we're reading a book about doulas. And so I'm wondering, like, what do you see do you see any differences or similarities between the work of an advocate and a work of a doula? And I'm thinking about like death doulas and kind of full spectrum care providing doulas in terms of like what this kind of, I'm really liking and grappling my head around this idea of this advocate, but I'm seeing a lot of sort of like themes and intersections with also the work and role of doulas, and particularly in your liquid morphine vignette that you mentioned.
That was my exact question.
Oh, okay, great.
Okay,
no way.
Great, we got
Really?
2 for 1.
Yeah, I'm a
doula,
and that's sort of my
Yes. So
that's sort of my experience.
So help me answer the question. See, I would think intuitively, maybe an advocate comes at it from just a slightly different lens, a more systemic lens. Although I do stay trench oriented, as we mentioned, but I'm thinking about how does the system work? How do I pull the lever, et cetera, et cetera. How would a doula look at that? I mean, let's say the same problem. Let's take the morphine one. Like, I wonder if the vantage point is different. In my head, I'm thinking maybe you've got more practical knowledge and maybe a little more sort of comfort with the actual physical medical things than an advocate does.
Well, oftentimes you're not. You are trained in terms of like trying to understand what's evidence-based and that kind of literature because you're providing that information, but a lot of it is like radical listening and this kind of idea of accompaniment and doing these tasks, like going to pick up, whose job is it to, make sure the liquid morphine is there. That example to me especially made me think of the work and role of doulas.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. Did you have anything to add to that?
So I've sort of been called to this kind of work since I was very young. I've always been the person who goes with my friends to their abortions, to their gynecology appointments. And so I was really called to birth doula work and later death doula work because I was basically like my dad's death doula throughout his cancer diagnosis and his hospice experience. So that story about the morphine like hit home so hard because there's so many of those moments when you're taking care of someone who's dying and so many things, so many needs that aren't addressed by the medical system. And I think doula work is like expanding the idea of what we think a doula is and what a doula can do is the perfect container for this sort of advocacy. My only hesitation there is like the more formality that I've seen around doula work, the more hospitals implement their own programs, the more barriers are actually put up to people accessing doulas, and the more limited of scope of what they're actually able to provide.
That makes sense.
So I would hate to see it so formalized as we're certifying healthcare advocates, but using the doula model of training each other, educating each other, is a grassroots sort of model for spreading healthcare knowledge among women. And
I agree. I agree, and that is something we can learn from other cultures hugely. We have this rugged individualism in our American DNA that makes us stop thinking about community-based solutions, and we really should be thinking about them.
We really should, and I feel like where people know about it is the example of the meal train, right? Like that's one that everyone knows and it's lovely, and I loved my meal train when I went through surgery and everything, but usually it's one friend who's got an organizing mindset who's like, so-and-so has a diagnosis. I'm gonna organize the food train. Rallies 10 other people. But we can just keep doing versions of that. Another person in our community who recently had a cancer diagnosis said that whether it was another friend who created a Google Calendar and put every chemo trip and everything, and then everyone got to grab a drive. And so people who are a little bit more organized can create spaces for other people to know how to help, because there are people who it just doesn't come as easy to like know how to help.
And there's Caring Bridge, and there's GoFundMe, and there are other things.
Hi everyone. First, I want to thank the event planner and for hosting us, and I do appreciate it's so much needed. And just to share a little bit of my story, I work for a top 5 pharmaceutical company. I'm a pharmacist myself. I work with clinical trials. For the past 3 years, I have been experiencing chronic pain on my arm due to repetitive work. I work remotely. And it turned out that I reached out to my manager, and they had to go through the process of going to a third-party company to ask for any medical assistance. I wouldn't say medical assistance, but workplace accommodation.
Yes.
And it took 3 months for them to approve only partially what my doctor's recommendation was for my health care. And simple things like up to now, it has been more than 6 months. I have now received a standing desk. The monitor I received last month. And now I'm in a situation that I heard from the CEO that they're going to fire 8% of the employees. And I'm looking internally how I go to this other path, because the kind of work I do is not sustainable. I need to find something that I don't do repetitive work on the mouse.
Yeah.
And now I am on reduced hours. Instead of working 40, I'm working 30 hours. And I cannot just share with my manager, hey, I'm looking for something else within the company, because that would be a red flag for them. Like, oh, she wants to move. I'm going to fire her. So now I already tried, because to move internally, you have to do gigs, right? And I asked, can I have these gig opportunity on leadership development, right? Oh no, you have to focus on your work. You're already on reduced hours. So now I am in this situation, like, where do I go next?
Yeah. Well, this is exactly the kind of thing that I deal with so often, because it's like you have these rights. You have the right to a reasonable accommodation under the Americans with Disabilities Act. It's the law. And then there's reality of what do employers actually do. Well, they often do what they feel they can get away with doing, right? And so, you know, you hearing that there's going to be an 8% workforce reduction has a chilling effect on you asking for what you want and need. That's the truth, right? So how do I handle that? How do you advise somebody in this circumstance? Well, the first thing is look and see if any other companies are hiring, because you have wonderful expertise. So that's number one, and just see. And the other thing is, you work from home?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. So maybe it's time to say, you know, I think I can do more hours now that I've had these other accommodations. If you can, and you
But
want
they haven't
to.
given her the accommodations yet.
No, it's more about the work I do. I cannot do it anymore, because the more I do, it worsens my pain.
Okay, so you can't then.
Yeah, I have
Then
to
you can't.
I have to do a different type of
Right.
job.
Are there other jobs that you would want in the company?
Yes, I'm looking into transition career.
Okay.
Inside the company.
I have a question for you. Like,
Yeah.
Is this someone you would tell to get a lawyer? I mean, is it at that
Oh,
point?
no, not yet.
Because she feels, okay.
Not yet.
She
I
feels
mean-
that they're not accommodating her request.
I mean, I think it's time to reopen the conversation about the accommodations, because if they haven't given you everything that your doctor has said, well, that's a red flag on them, and then it's also a hedge against them firing you, because you can't fire the person who said, hey, I'm disabled, I need you to deal with my disability.
So continue to insist and document and submit in a way almost as self-protective, although it feels like you're exposing yourself to more risk. I think her point is maybe it's actually protecting
Well, it
you.
could protect you more. I mean, I don't want you to be in a situation where you find yourself having to sue an employer, because that's a nightmare. And I don't want you.
I already have enough stress.
I don't want you to have that. It's too stressful. But
as someone who's been on the opposite side of this conversation, because I had an employee who had a similar situation, and the first question I had, because I had never dealt with like the FMLA situation before, who decides what the reasonability of the accommodations are?
Yeah.
Who decides that? And then the second thing is, if we're not able to do that as a company, what do we do then?
Yeah. So there's this thing called JAN, which is the Job Accommodation Network, which is part of the Department of Labor. And, you know, if you can't agree to a reasonable accommodation, the employee and the employer can agree to check in with them and let them help you figure it out. It's really strange, right? The cat is out of the bag on work from home. It used to be work from home was the biggest accommodation and everybody wanted it. And now it's pretty easy to get work from home. And employers who try to say, oh, we can't do that, it's a hardship, you're like, really? You know, like things have changed. But that's usually what you do is that, because if you can't come to an agreement. But it sounds like you guys came to an agreement, they're just not doing it.
Correct. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And then my question is, should I share with my manager that I want to transition into a different role, that it's not related to the science? I'm just so fed up with too much details. I want to do something else in the company. But then should I share with him? Because it could be the other way around. He's not telling me, Fernanda, you should be looking for something else.
Right.
Because he might be saying that I am incapable of doing what I'm doing.
I have to jump in here only. I'm going to have you guys finish this conversation after. I want to give some closing remarks for the people who do need to stay on time because we were supposed to end around 7. We're already over. I want to say a couple of things here. First of all, clearly a star. Also, Gainesville on the map. She was at Harvard Business School presenting 2 days ago. Here she is at the Lynx. So I'm very proud of that. Very proud that we're having these stars coming through town. We're going to linger. So you guys can linger and have these conversations. Get a copy of the book. Come get it signed. Pick Rebecca's brain. I'm her ride home, so don't worry. She can linger. I can linger with her. Thank you guys so much for coming. Obviously, this conversation is potent. That's why we're running over time. And I hate to cut off, but I know that that fire inside of Rebecca means that she's probably willing to linger and chat with each of you as much as you would like. So let's give Rebecca a huge round of applause. Thank you guys for being patient. I know that we ran over, and she and I are not going anywhere.